Welcome to the Wayne Public Library's virtual author chat. My guest today is Linda Forrester. Linda Forrester is a teacher, writer, and singer. She taught English as a second language for many years at LaGuardia Community College, City University of New York. Her students spanned the globe and brought the world to her. The many stories in the fabulous adventures of Minnie the Wonder Cat, Fables for All Ages, began as a writing assignment for those dear students. She asked them to write a children's story, weaving together elements of their home countries and their experiences in New York City. In order to help the students with their assignment, Miss Forrester decided she had to write a story herself. So she crafted a tale about her cat, Minnie, but adorned her with superpowers. This proved to be so much fun that she continued to write one story after another, each addressing a different social issue, but drawing a common theme of love, respect, human and animal rights, justice, and redemption. Oh, and music. Musical themes run throughout the stories. Linda Forrester grew up as part of a musical family, and she sang classical music and opera from an early age. Music has been an important part of her life, and she has performed in this country and in Italy, where she spent precious years. Retired now, Forrester continues writing, turning her attention to haiku now, singing in a large chorus, studying Tibetan Buddhism, and teaching an online Buddhist class. She lives contentedly in Manhattan with her tawny cat, Tigger. Welcome, Linda. Please tell us a little more about yourself and your novel, The Fabulous Adventures of Minnie the Wonder Cat, Fables for All Ages.
Thank you very much, Janet. It's lovely to be here, and I appreciate this opportunity. As for my life, it's pretty much as you cited at the end of that introduction. I live here and in New York City, and I study Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, and I teach also. I love music. And I taught English to speakers of other languages for over 30 years, 25 of which were at LaGuardia Community College, which is part of City University of New York. And I taught many students from all around the world, and I really loved that job. It was a great job. I enjoyed it. And as you mentioned, I assigned my students to write a children's story. And I got that idea because I had read something in the New York Times about another CUNY professor who had done the same thing. And I thought, that sounds good. So I tried it. And it was surprisingly well received. The students really enjoyed doing it. It was a complete change from their usual weekly essays that they used to do. And their imagination just went wild. And they incorporated elements of their home country and their life in New York City. And so it went very well. But as mentioned, I felt like I had to learn more about it myself because I'd never done it. So I looked online to research it a little bit and thought, well, I can try this. And I did so. And I wrote the first story. And I enjoyed it so much that then I just went on from there and wrote another and wrote another and wrote another over a series of years. Altogether, there are 7 stories in this book. And they all follow in order, in sequence. So that's about the size of that. The ideas for them flowed easily, and I really enjoyed writing them.
The stories that are covered in the book, there are a variety of themes, including immigration, elder abuse, and the pandemic. How did you choose the topics for each of the short stories?
Well, they're topics that my students and I discussed in class, and topics that were interesting to me. And they just kind of came about. Yeah, immigration, prejudice, and racism, the value of the arts, music. Yeah, and my cat characters really kind of directed the action of what they were, what issues we got into and how we proceeded with the stories. But I will say that I think it's important, to confront ethical issues at this time. It's such a crazy time, and to try to find a way to make the world better. And that's a job for everybody of all ages, in all walks of life. And there are so many ways of doing it. And this was one way I felt I could put in my own word without doing it too directly. So I had the cats kind of steer us into various scenarios and issues. And I didn't want to be too preachy with it, expounding my Buddhist values. I tried to touch on serious issues with a light touch, with a sense of humor. And I hope that readers will find them funny sometimes and leave the stories with a smile.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I did get a chance to read them, and I did smile. I did laugh. Um, did you mentioned your students, but did you draw inspiration from real people or events when creating the storylines for the short stories in the book?
Oh, yeah, sure. In different ways. For example, fourth story is about the pandemic, and I wrote it during the pandemic. No, that's the fifth story, right? The third story, the trip back to Catalonia, their homeland, um, features a beautiful place that really is very much like the Buddhist center in France, where I go for retreat almost every year. Um, in the last story, which is set in 1924, I drew on a lot of actual historical events of that period and historical personages too. So a couple of the characters are kind of like the gangsters of the 1920s. And yeah, and at the end of that chapter, the cats meet a famous French explorer and writer who goes to the Himalayan mountains and comes back and writes about Buddhist practices that she found there. So yeah, there are all kinds of things that are real, and then they're sort of fictionalized. Yeah.
Um, there are beautiful illustrations in the books. Did you do the illustrations, or did you have somebody else do them?
Well, this is a sad story, and unfortunately, no, I didn't do them, and they were done, and they were done by, I think, probably a staff of illustrators at Austin Macaulay Publishers. And I don't know who they were. I wanted them to receive credit because it did turn out well, but they didn't get credit. And apparently that's the way it goes with this publishing company. The process was they asked me what I wanted for illustrations, and I sent them descriptions of each one. And then they sent me back, possible drawings. And at first, some of them were really far afield. So I had to do they did a number of drafts before they came up with what they had at the end. But I think they did end up with good illustrations. So I'm happy about that, and sorry they didn't get the credit that they deserved.
Absolutely. They were really, really made the stories come to life.
Mm.
um, how so in your bio I mentioned that you turned your attention to writing haiku. Um, how does writing short story differ from writing short poetry? And do you prefer one format over the other?
Oh no, I don't. They're completely different. Um, the writing the short stories was fun. It was just it was easy for me, and the ideas flowed easily. Haiku is interesting. I think I started doing it in high school, but I hadn't done it, for many years. And I've come back to it recently, and I like the moderation of the form. It's just 5 lines and 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables. And I've found that sticking to that little form, one can convey a certain amount of meaning or beauty or um, almost anything, but it's interesting. It's very interesting. And I know, I'm not writing real haiku, and it's kind of a spin-off version of this Japanese very old style of writing. Um, but I've always felt a warm kinship with Japanese culture. And so it's just pleasant to do. I'm not publishing any of these, it's just mostly for my own sake. I enjoy writing them.
So, for your short story, for the book, what do you hope your readers feel or experience when they read your stories?
Well, I hope they find something in them to reflect on, to think about, to enjoy, and maybe to have a laugh or two as they go along. My messages are pretty relentlessly positive, you know. Um, I'd like readers to see that there are many possibilities open to them, and we all have a kind of a magic within us, and we can display that magic if we cultivate it, if we have courage and we believe in ourselves. So I think that's pretty much what I'd like to convey in the stories.
Okay. Um, what are you currently working on? Is it
Not
just nothing? Mm.
Nothing. I tried for a little while to write another mini story, but it just wasn't coming. I wrote a few paragraphs and then it just isn't there. So I feel like something else will happen and hopefully soon, but I'm not actively pursuing anything at the moment. I think it'll present itself. That's the sort of writer I am. If I'm a writer, it just comes naturally. I don't do a lot of plotting, in advance. It just sort of comes upon me. So,
Um, and what is your writing process like from idea to finished manuscript? If you're saying it just comes, um, do do you have like a ritual where I sit down in the morning or I'm best, write best at night, or is there any formula that you do, like any format that you take to writing your stories?
mm.
Um,
That's changed over the years, as my timing has changed too. Um, there isn't a specific time. It generally has come when I have the time and I do it. Um, and I do sit down with an idea of a story. I have an idea, but as I say, I don't plot it specifically. I don't decide what's going to happen at every moment. And somehow the cats were good enough characters that they kind of made suggestions as it was going along. I mean, I don't want to sound too hokey about that, but it's like they took it on. Um, yeah. So and in this particular book, one story was connected to the next story because the characters in the it related back to the story before, so they told a little bit about what happened before. So it kind of connected all of the stories together in the manuscript. Um, yeah, right. I didn't labor over the stories too much. I mean, as I was writing them, I edited them, I revised them as I was going along, but I didn't really work at them too much. I mean, sometimes people revise and revise and revise. I have friends who revise a million times, and I didn't do that. I just let them kind of be what they were. So that was it.
and do you see the stories as being children's stories as what you assigned your students, or do you see them more as like kind of parables, kind of? Um,
Hmm. That's complicated because they did start out being children's stories, but I pretty much found that I was trying to get into other regions, and so that's why I called them fables for all ages. Austin Macaulay Publishers labeled them as young adult, although I really think they're kind of for everybody. And the people who have read them have mostly been adults, with a few exceptions. So they are for everybody. Um, I think that developed as it went along. The first story was definitely more geared for kids, but then the stories become increasingly complex as it goes along.
um, when it came to writing, do you find that there's writing in general, all the writing you've done, is there a more difficult part of writing for you? Or do you feel that there's like something is what you do best with your writing?
Well, I was thinking about that question. These stories were not difficult to write. They were easy in a sort of a way in that they flowed. When I was working at the university, I sometimes had to do academic writing in a certain amount of time, and I had deadlines, and that put a kind of pressure on. So it didn't come quite as steadily, you know. And yet, really, I enjoy writing, and I've always felt the value of writing and never really found it difficult in a sense because I think it's so important. It's always helped me to work through difficulties or understand things better. I mean, I write so that I can understand the world better and think think through problems, all of this sort of thing. I write to do that. Um, yeah. So writing is a very good thing.
It absolutely is. Yes. Um, and did you ever receive a really good piece of advice regarding your writing that you would like to share with us?
All right. Well, so in the first grade, I had a teacher whose name was Barbara Book. And Miss Book, when I wrote something, she would put a gold star on it, and then she would write, "Lovely work, Linda!" exclamation point. And as you can see, I've always remembered that. I've never forgotten. I think it's just this positive reinforcement that comes from people that really helps. And that's true for anybody who writes anything. And so when I was teaching, I did try to find the good points in what my students were writing because I wanted them to have that same experience. I think I mean, not that we can't have criticism, but I think, encouragement is so helpful to people who are trying to express themselves in writing. And so that helped me when people read what I wrote and said, "Oh, this is fun, this is good, keep on going," then that helped me. So I think as far as good advice, that's the best advice. Not that not that I never got comments. I mean, I take people's comments under consideration. Like my dear sister, who is here today, mentioned at one point that one of the characters in the last story just she had no sympathy for him. She didn't really like him. And so I redid him a bit, I gave him more of a backstory and I made his actions more plausible in a way. And it really improved it. So I'm not above accepting criticism. Uh, okay.
Oh, thank you. um, stories were written over the course of about 5 to 6 years. How did you approach editing and revising the stories for the short story collection?
Oh, okay. Well, as I mentioned, when I was writing them, I didn't do too much editing of them. But when after a few years, when I started thinking about maybe taking them toward publication, I realized that I was a bit haphazard in the first couple stories. I just wanted to get them down on paper, and I was doing it as kind of like play dialogue is written with the character's name at one side and what they said on the other side. And by the time I got to like the third or fourth story, I thought, wait a minute, this is wrong. And so I went back and I redid actually the first three stories and made it into a more all-encompassing narrative that incorporated dialogue. And I was much happier about it. The earlier stories looked scruffy to me the way they were. So yeah, that it took a little bit of time, but I think it was worth the effort.
And did you, is the book, are the stories in the order that you wrote them?
They are.
Okay.
They. Mhm.
Okay. Um, so you mentioned your publisher earlier in terms of the illustrations. What was your publishing journey, and what were some of the more important lessons you learned throughout the journey?
Well, I'll just say in general, this is difficult. It's a difficult process for anyone who's trying to write. Um, and as far as this went for me, I had tried several publishers. I sent queries to several publishers, and especially one who does Buddhist books. I thought, well, this will be a natural, but nothing was really happening. And then at one point, when I was online looking at another site, this Austin Macaulay Publishing came up. And I looked at it and I thought, well, maybe this is something. And I sent in the manuscript. And after a couple months, I got word from them that, well, yes, they would publish it. And so that's how it happened. It all felt kind of accidental. Um, yeah. But I do want to say to people that anything they can do is good. There's nothing wrong with self-publishing. People should publish themselves. People should do whatever they find if they want to get their book out. Um, just a week ago, a friend of a friend published a book on St. Francis of Assisi. It's this on Amazon. And she, it was easy for her to do, and it got published right away, and people were already seeing it and buying it. So, whatever you want to do, they're all different approaches to publishing, I think.
That is true. And everything, whatever's going to work for the author is, that's the path that they should probably pursue.
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned your sister providing you some feedback on one of your stories. What role, if any, did beta readers or editors play in your writing process?
Not too much, to be honest. I'm kind of an old bird, jumping into this game. And so I'm used to going my own way. And as I say, I'm open to people's comments. And I don't see anything wrong with that. I think it's wonderful for people who want to do it. Writing groups, the same thing. A number of friends are very much involved in writing groups. But at this point, I don't really want to start onto that road. Um, so I just kind of follow my own way and see what happens.
Okay. So that kind of answers my next question about writers groups or critique partners. Um, so what advice would you give a new writer that's just starting out?
Um, to just follow their own inner guide, not be too concerned about specific forms or following a set of rules, that they can do that more later as they want to. And sometimes, I mean, I'm not saying there are no rules. Sometimes it's good to have parameters in what wants to achieve. But yeah, I think people, and sometimes people in writing groups are too fixed on what other people said before them, as well, not only as a prompt, but as a way of going about it. And I think one doesn't find one's individual voice in that way. So somehow they have to come to it on their own. And thinking about my experience as a writing teacher to students of other languages, um, well, I retired in the fall of 2021, and at that time AI was just starting to come in, but already the students were looking to the internet to grab sentences and paragraphs and all of this, and put it into their weekly essays. And of course, we always knew that it was not original. It didn't come from them. It was easy to check and all of this kind of thing. And I just tried to explain to them without being too harsh that they wouldn't learn anything from it, and that it certainly wouldn't make them into writers, because the writing has to come from within. And the stuff that's produced in that way is so uniform, a machine could do it. Um, so anyway, that's just what I would say. I would say develop your style, follow your voice. I think that's all.
Okay. And my final question is, what was the most rewarding part of writing this book for you?
The freedom of it. Um, the fact that I found a kind of new joyous sort of expression that I'd never had before. Yeah, it was a delight to do. It was a delight at sometimes. Um, and hopefully through these stories, I can offer people hope, offer them joy, you know, touch them in certain ways. It's just the ability to kind of let I don't know, share one's soul in a sense. That was the best, I think.
Okay. So I am going to ask if there are any questions. If I took off the security for unmuting yourself, so if you wanted to ask it in the chat, that's always available. If you want to unmute yourself, you can ask a question directly to Linda. For me, I'm going to say that when I was reading the stories, I felt like it reminded me, and I read this ages ago, Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist, because it's a story. It felt like reading a children's book, but it wasn't a children's book. You're learning. Yeah, there's some clear messages that are coming through. So I wanted to let you know that that was the thought process when I was reading. I was like, oh, this is very reminiscent for me. So
Thank you. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, interesting.
so if you wanted to ask a question, please feel free to ask.
I just wanted to give a shout out to the original Minnie
Oh, yes.
because I loved her very much. She would come to my house every summer for her summer vacation when Linda went to France. So
Mm.
Mother and I knew Minnie very well and we loved her. So Linda, thank you for writing about her and showing us what she might have done had she had superpowers. Maybe she did too.
Maybe she did, yeah. We don't know what happened, when we were out of the house.
Exactly. When you went off to teach,
Mhm,
she may have been doing all of these things and more.
mhm. Thank you, sirs.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Linda, for being with us this morning and for sharing a little bit more about your book. All the best of luck with the fabulous adventures of Minnie the Wonder Cat, Fables for All Ages, and any other writing that you might have coming down the pike, if you choose to publish or not. I mean, best of luck with it.
Thank you very much, Janet. Thank you. A pleasure.